Dan Steele.
Hello.
Welcome to the Arrive and Thrive Career Podcast.
It is lovely to be here. This is a very good setup. I'm still sorry. I've been in here for a little bit. I'm still reeling. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you. We try and make things a little bit more legit around here.
Absolutely, as opposed to some previous podcasts that I've been on from around this way.
So, Dan, can you introduce yourself to our listeners? What is it that you do? And, what gets you up in the morning?
So I was previously a primary school teacher and then assistant principal at a school in North Frankston for a number of years, and made my transition out into educational coaching, so leadership coaching, and also working with teachers to improve their teaching practice. So which is a little bit of a shift, but not too much of a shift out of schools.
Fantastic. And so you've been a primary school teacher, secondary school teacher.
A little bit of secondary when I lived over in WA.
Okay, cool. So take us back to what made you want to be a teacher.
Oh, well,
the big question.
Yeah, the big hard hitting. No, so I when I finished school, I didn't fully know what I wanted to do. I did all sorts of subjects. I was like physics, bio, then also did maths, but then studio arts, media, so just loved it all. So it's sort of now when I look back, it makes sense that I went into teaching and education, particularly in primary. But I actually went and did a year of landscape architecture at RMIT, and it didn't work. It didn't work for me. I was definitely way too immature. I'd come from an all-boys school, so I was very caught up that there were also boys and girls in my classes. But so I realised, look, I really bombed out. It just didn't work. But the program director, when I went and spoke to him, I explained that I was grabbing whatever small amount of cash I had, and I was going to go backpacking around Europe for about 6-7 months. And he said, "I'm not going to sign off your exit form unless you can tell me that you've got a plan before you can go."
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty amazing what he did.
Yeah.
So a big shout out to Michael Howard was his name.
Hope you're listening, Mike.
Yeah, good on you, Mike. And so my older sister was a primary school teacher, and she used to come home and just tell stories, or when we'd catch up, just share stories. And it just sounded like it was fun every day. The kids just sounded amazing. I'd never thought about being a teacher at all. So before I headed off, spoke to this guy, Michael Howard, said, "Look, I'm actually going to go for primary school teaching," set it up, organised for that, and then went off backpacking, came back. And I think we were about 5 weeks in, so lucky enough to get into Melbourne Uni primary teaching. 5 weeks into the degree, they send you out on teaching rounds. So it's sort of like, either sink or swim sort of thing. But it's great because people instantly realise, no, this isn't for me. And I went in and met a principal, and he said, "Look, you can either work with preps or kids in grade 6." And I was terrified of the preps. So I said, "I'm going to go the preps." So I went in and did it. And literally the first day, I was like, this is the bloody best. I loved it.
Yep.
Just so much fun, so much energy. There's so much thought. It's all based on relationships. So from the get-go, I discovered that I enjoyed it, and I seemed to be reasonably good at it. So I just loved it, and from that moment didn't look back. I never actually had any grand ambitions. I never thought about leadership stuff, nothing like that. I was just in the moment, enjoying just helping kids want to be engaged and enjoy what they were doing.
Yeah, fantastic. Compared to now, where you're running leadership and coaching programs for schools to improve their school culture and teacher relationships, and
it sort of depends on what they want, but really in the end, if we had to say it in a really clear way, the way I try and articulate it is, so for principals or assistant principals, we help them build up their leadership skills, particularly around communication. For teachers, it's helping them work out, well, what are the really high impact teaching strategies you can use, and what's a cycle of coaching that you can engage in to just make that little tweak instead of trying to change everything about your teaching. It's just what's the one little shift you can make? And then a really big interest for me, and it's part of some of the doctoral study that I'm doing, is around middle leaders. So about ways that, because I remember it was so tough as a middle leader, you've got so many different hats on.
Yep.
Ways that we can help middle leaders better understand their role and then also build up their confidence. So they're just really clear about what it is that they do as a leader. Yeah.
Mate, because I've personally worked in a school for, I worked in a school for about 2.5 years in like a careers role while I was building Arrive and Thrive. And that was one of the best experiences for my work and business because I got to fully understand like the inner systems and the working relationships within a school.
Yeah.
And one thing I learnt is that teachers are stretched incredibly thin.
Yep.
And so what are some things that you've noticed in the work and your experience about the difficulty of teaching? Because I think I had another friend on the podcast and he's a teacher and he was like, when I first started teaching, we got all these big holidays. We were finishing at 3, like blah, 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 blah. And then he goes, now that is completely different. And I'm often fascinated with ways in which you can be more productive, just in general. And I'm assuming there's some hacks that teachers can tap into to ensure that they're, I suppose, at the head of their game and have the student at their main focus, which is, I suppose, is what we're trying to do with
also
teaching.
Be able to look after themselves and have a life.
Yeah, it's such a good point.
Yeah, I think there's so many different things you could do. I think in the end, listening to you, as soon as you started asking that question, my first thought was you need to learn the power in how to say no to things and back yourself with that. So, the tricky part with being a classroom teacher is you're also affected by other leaders or, systems where you don't have a say in that. And so you just sort of have to enact some directives. But there's also some times when you can push back and ask and say like, well, is there a different way we might be able to do that? I'm just thinking, look, purely on a practical sense, for me, it was thinking about if I'm saying yes to this, what am I saying no to, or vice versa? If I say no to this, then what do I get to say yes to? And for me, that was a really big shift, particularly when I became a dad to our first girl, because I realised like so often, and I'm not sure if you had this experience, but just meetings, like just because they set and say they have to go for an hour, do they actually have to go for an hour, or are we just sitting around for an hour, or are we starting late and then continuing to stay back till 4:30, 5 o'clock, and then I don't get to see my girls. So for me, it was about saying, well, yeah, if we're going to say yes to this meeting, okay, so we're going to say no to turning up late. We're going to say no to like getting off track. We're going to say no to like having all these different things on your agenda. And just being super clear, like what is it why are we here? What's the purpose for our meeting? Another big thing, look, and it probably comes down to mindset for teachers, I think as well, is working out and it's probably going into a coaching question. But
totally fine. Love a coaching question here on the podcast.
You probably grew up with them around the breakfast table, I imagine now after what you told me before we recorded. No, so it's really around, well, what are your expectations of yourself? I had this amazing person that coached me, and they said when I first started as an assistant principal, they said, what is it that you want to start doing from the very beginning that you're going to adhere to that's going to set you up for success? And I wish someone had asked me that when I was a classroom teacher, because I always used to just like stay back late because I saw other people doing that. So for me, I think it's really about shifting that mindset of what are the expectations you hold on yourself? Do you have to? Is that the most important thing that you have to do? Being really clear about what it is that you want. And then I think that then changes the way that you set up your week, or, like the time that you arrive, or just being okay with like some days you might get there just before the bell. That's okay. Like as long as you're still you're prepared and that sort of stuff. So look, I also think there's a whole number of things. There's the use of digital technologies. There's the ability to collaborate really well. If you can set up, and I always used to really invest in building up really strong teams. Yep. So we got really clear on what were going to be the most helpful things we could do if we're all, and being in primary school, so if we were in grade 5, 6 team, if we were planning out a unit of maths or a couple of weeks of maths where we had the clear aims that we wanted, how could we use something like Google Slides to just share and collaborate and have access to materials so you're not having to make stuff. We've got 4 people doing the same thing separately for themselves. So being really clear about that. So I think making an expectation of collaborating and being clear that collaboration actually means I take responsibility for my learning, but also the learning of others. So trying to weave in those expectations. And that sounds, as I say this now, that sounds really easy, but you know what it's like. You're working with humans and you then have to manage tensions and conflicts and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, to summarize, I think really it's about being aware of what's your expectations on yourself and then how can you manage those, being clear on what it is that you actually want out of a week. If a week worked really well, get really clear on what that is. Yep. I think that's sort of what I boil it down to. Yeah, I think so. And yeah, I guess access those digital technologies that, can save you time.
Yeah, the thing that fascinates me too is like there seems to be so many competing stakeholders within the teacher role. There's students, there's parents, there's other teachers.
Oh my gosh, yeah, so many.
There's leadership. Yep. And so trying to manage those, in my opinion, would be, and what I've seen, can be really hard.
Yeah.
Within the work that you do, like what are some, does that come into the conversation? And I guess it comes back to that piece that you're saying about saying no and like, giving yourself a little bit of space, a little bit of time to either process, then decide on what is the next best step forward or how to manage a certain student or relationship within the school. Yeah, just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I think listening to you talk, the biggest thing that often comes down to conversations I'm having with senior leaders or middle leaders or teachers is so often it comes back to helping them realise, well, what's in your control and then what's out of your control. And once they start to, I literally draw like Venn diagram and then, so you've got those bits that overlap. Yep. When they realise that there's a lot more out of their control and there's a lot less that's in their control, but they can actually really focus on those. So, like you choosing to prepare certain things or the way that you can communicate to your team or having to lean into a tricky conversation if someone's not done what they said they would, you're in control of being able to have those conversations or raise those things, which I think then reduces the pressure on them because all the other stuff, like if there's timetable changes or if they get given an extra because someone else is called in sick, you can't sort of control it. You just have to, which is the complexity in education. And I think too, another big one in regards to the parent stakeholders is, in primary or secondary schools, you get parents that turn up and want to have a meeting with you. I think and I used to do this in my work when I was in schools, helping particularly grads, was about empowering them to be able to say, it is really important that we catch up. I really value your child. Now's not the best time. So when would work best for you? Because if they catch you just before the bell or just before something's happening like that, that's actually sets you up for the rest of the day. You get really flustered. So people get scared of having a 10-second quick little thing, but I really do want to, you're so right. That's so important to catch up. I'm really mindful. I want to make it important for you. So could we do 20 minutes at the end of today or could we do the end of Wednesday? Is that okay? Or if that doesn't work, please just let me know what sometimes. And then it's not you shutting down the person, but you're actually holding a boundary because you can turn, and I used to literally turn and say, look, I've just got everyone here in class. I really want to have this time with you, but I can't now. When would work best? And most parents get it. If they don't, they're probably an unreasonable person, which gives you a heads up anyway that you're probably going to need. And then, you can reach out to another leader and say, look, I've got this person that keeps approaching. So I think in regards to that, I think with the leadership stakeholders, the big thing I would say with that is, so if you're getting, I describe myself as a pretty curious person. I always like to know what's going on or like why things are happening. So to maybe if you're a teacher and there's things that you feel like the leadership are pushing down or things that are coming across, is always come back to try and work out who is someone you've already got a relationship with in leadership. And just ask them those questions like, well, this is what I've noticed. Can you tell me a little more about why we're having to do this thing? I'm just really interested to know. I'm really curious to know why, because they might give you some better perspectives. Or if that leader's like, I don't know. That's a really good insight, because that then opens the door for you to say, well, that's really interesting because what I've now found is by, you guys saying that we have to do this, I've started to notice there's a pattern for the kids or myself with this. So you're actually, creating the door for some feedback to them too. So, which then also, if leadership have brought in something that they haven't consulted teachers with, you give them the feedback. If they're good leaders, they should listen and maybe try and adapt it, because that's the way they should be thinking. And it sort of just serves the teacher well to know that you can be empowered to speak up and bring about that change.
Yeah. That transition piece between teaching and stepping into like more leadership roles. To talk about your journey. So you were a classroom teacher, and then you started to, I'm assuming you took on some more leadership roles, and then when the assistant principal role came up.
It's an interesting journey. So we, my wife and I, we taught in the hardcore suburb of, she was in the hardcore suburb of Camberwell South, not hardcore at all. And I was in the very tough suburb of Northbourne, also not hard at all. So we were really lucky. The schools that we started in, they just happened to be, it was really by luck. They were really outstanding schools. So we were very lucky. We spent 4 years in our first schools, and we just got mentored. And there was some sort of coaching that occurred as well, which I assumed everyone else got, which I've now realised is actually not the case. So I started there, and then we actually moved to the Kimberley, and we went and lived and taught in this remote Aboriginal community for a couple of years. And so I got my first leadership role there, which was really good. I remember calling up a principal at the time, and I was offered to become the maths leader of the school. And I always had an interest in teaching maths because so often kids and also teachers are terrified of maths. They just think, I can't do this.
I'm terrified of maths.
Confession. So my go-to, so the thing that I would then say is that I feel like you haven't been set up to think you can do it.
Yeah, cool.
And so I used to love teaching strategies to kids and also to the teachers particularly about how to, get empowered with maths and realise there's not just one way to do it. So I called up this principal and I said, I've been offered this maths leadership role. In remote communities, often there's transiency. So you often can step up and get into these leadership roles, often probably too quick. You get thrown into some overwhelming situations. Like at one point I was also the deputy principal for a little bit. I had no idea what I was doing. But I called up this principal and I said, look, I've been offered this role. I'm not too sure, if I'm ready. And he said, how great. You're in a setting where it's not like you're not in a massive school where there's a huge spotlight on you. So you can actually try out some things. You're in a smaller setting. It sounds like the leadership are giving you access to have a go. So after he said that, I was like, what a great idea. You just get to, free yourself up. Again, giving my own self the advice of take the expectations off your shoulders, just reduce it a bit. So I took on the maths role, and the thing that I discovered was it's all about, I loved it straight away because it was all about helping more kids. I realised instead of helping the 20 or the 30 kids that were in my class, I could suddenly make more of an impact. So I love that. So got my my feet into it, and my feet into it. I don't even know what that means.
Feet wet?
Yeah, my feet wet. There we go. Got my feet into it. Guys, let's just make that a thing now. All right. So I got my feet wet, and I really enjoyed it. And and then that just led to me then realising when we were moving back to Melbourne, there was some other maths leadership roles. I'm a massive learning and teaching nerd. I'm just fascinated by how do you engage kids and people. So I then was able to move from that into like a wider whole school role about overseeing the learning and teaching of a school in a little, or not that little, Catholic primary school. And then we moved down the coast, and I did the stay-at-home dad thing and was very lucky enough to be able to look after our girls, and my wife had this amazing opportunity for this leadership role. So when we moved down here, I happened to see that Aldercourt Primary School had an assistant principal role going, and it was all the things, like when I looked through, it was just like about student engagement, bringing in innovative, high-impact teaching strategies, and really at the heart of it was supporting the teachers to better understand what they did and help them. And for me, it was leadership's always been about, I've now realised it's just how do I better help people. So I grew up with my dad always saying, why wouldn't you try? So I was like, why wouldn't I try? I'll throw my hat in the ring. Yeah. And so part of the interview process was I got to share a story about like what my vision was for what the learning and teaching could look like over a few years. So I shared that, and I must have somehow done all right. So they said, yeah, come on in. And so it was amazing. So pretty much that vision that I spelt out, we enacted and brought in, and I didn't look back. It was amazing. It was really, really challenging setting, but the staff were genuinely some of the greatest teachers I've ever seen. And I loved it. But it was. I never planned on ever going into leadership roles at all. It was it was a thing where there was this moment, and I thought, well, if I can help, that'd be really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with that transition because I often hear from teachers too that there's no kind of formal leadership training.
Yeah.
So when you transition from teacher to team leader or to subject specialist and you're kind of managing and leading other teachers.
Yeah. Yep.
To my knowledge, there's no formal training around that. And,
no. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. And people kind of go, you're a great teacher.
Yeah,
you must
correct.
be a good leader,
Yeah.
or you must be a good manager.
Yep.
And I think it's a classic example in other industries too. You're a great technical engineer. You're going to be a great leader.
Yep.
And I feel like sometimes I feel like there needs to be a shift in that process of training into that leadership and management roles where it's like, you know, and I think we're seeing that in some industries where people are going like, you're just a fantastic technical individual contributor. That's the track that you want to go down. Fantastic.
Yep.
We need people like that. We also need people who go, you know, my technical skills aren't the best, but my people skills is where I want to thrive.
Yep.
Like when you work with schools, like is there a process that you talk about with that, or what's your take?
Well, I think I'm also drawn to think of I think the game changer for me was, so when I took on this learning and teaching role was around the same time I did my Masters of Education. And so it was educational leadership, and at the heart of it was me better understanding myself as a leader, but also exploring leadership frameworks. So it was a game changer because instantly, and the biggest thing that I now focus on is being a really intentional leader. So it's about being really clear with what you want. So I think within the education systems, there is some formal training, but I think and if I'm picking up on what you're sort of hinting at as well, is within schools, there's probably not the intentional development of leaders. So I think there is wraparounds within the systems, like there's learning specialists and leading teachers in Victoria. And the difference even between that. So a learning specialist is someone that is probably more wanting to stay in the classroom. So they're a really highly skilled practitioner. So their career pathway might be more focused in the classroom versus a leading teacher who might be considering moving into a principal role. So their idea is they might then get freed up where they're not in the classroom as much, but what they're starting to do is practicing over whole school and leading whole school change and initiatives. So they've created the positions. And then at the same time, you've also got masters courses that support people with that. So, you know, like of instructional leadership or inclusive education or educational leadership. So you've got those, but I think the gap that's in schools, and hence the reason like the business, me working for Growth Coaching International exists, is at the heart of it in a school, we don't have enough intentional development of leaders. So I think the thing that I genuinely love every single day with the work that I get to do now is either helping the principal, and I love working with principals who they start to think about this, and once they realize that if they intentionally start to set up their assistant principals and their team leaders to work out, well, what's my role, what's my purpose, and then do I have the things at hand to help me achieve that, it's a game changer because it helps the principal reduce their workload if they build up others, but it also helps them spot gaps to say, well, how do we develop people? What is it that we do? Do we get some new classroom teachers that are in there that actually see the development pathways, therefore they'll stay, they actually can start to recruit and retain people more. So I think there is a definite gap in schools with that really intentional development of people. And hence, you know, like that's why I think there's coaching and mentoring is a game changer. Yeah,
absolutely. So if you've got a school, because we get a lot of educators listening to our potty. If you've got so if one of our listeners is going, great, I want to implement some sort of like leadership or teacher mentor system, well, like what, in your mind, what would be the first couple of things they need to consider?
Yeah. Oh, geez, that's such a big question. I think so. At the heart of that question, are you thinking of classroom teachers, or are you thinking of people within leadership roles right now?
Mate, you're such a coach. I love it. Just going, that's a good question. Let's take that question a little bit differently. Love it. I'm thinking from the classroom teacher perspective.
So I think they should, if a school is really clear on that, a classroom teacher should be able to know and say, well, do I have a formal mentor, or is there some sort of mentoring program that we have in the school? And I don't mean so in Victoria or in other states where you're moving from like being a grad teacher to becoming like fully recognised. I don't mean that sort of mentoring where you just move through a project. I mean like career and sort of developmental mentoring. So do they have a program like that? If they don't, then that probably sets you up to then start to go find, again, someone you've got a good relationship with within any sort of leadership role, just to ask about the mentoring programs they have. At the same time, because you've got coaching and mentoring that work really well together and separately, is try and find out, do they have some sort of instructional coaching? So instructional coaching is about helping teachers with their teaching strategies. So if you're wanting to improve and build up your teachers, they should have some sort of instructional coaching within there. And then another layer is also looking at your leadership coaching. So which is a brilliant way for like your talent management. So a classroom teacher, if you're possibly considering some sort of leadership position down the track, is just to ask to say like, is there a way that we develop, or like, are we looking for future leaders? Is there some sort of leadership coaching that I could do or that we could be a part of?
Yep.
I think there's those things because you've still like, there's three sort of structures that I've just named just there. If a school has none, that's actually a really good opportunity to say, would it be all right if I could explore some possibilities of what this could look like? Yep. Or you plant the seed for, again, a good leader to say, geez, I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I also think too, listening to that, if it's for someone wanting to develop, I'm not sure if you were meaning explicitly around developing leaders, but just developing themselves. I think the critical thing we know in schools is you learn from people around you in the staff room. So if there's some sort of way that you can do peer-to-peer coaching or, mentoring like that. So, and it could be informal or formal, but it's better if it's formal because you then get the time allocation. So again, it goes back to workload. You're not having to do an extra thing. So I think teachers can start to think of, is there some sort of peer mentoring that occurs alongside that as well? Because if it's not formalised, then you're probably not getting access to the time. And I know right now in schools with staffing shortages, that's already a challenge. But if you as a school can prioritise it, you'll make it happen. And leaders will do that. So there are always ways around it. So I think they're the sort of four things. I hope that sort of added to it. But that's something I definitely, and I'd just say it might sound really silly, but it's even just asking if you're a teacher, like asking them, what are the ways that we develop as a school, our teachers and our leaders? And try and ask that to a leader or, in your team, or if you don't feel comfortable raising it, like see if you can, I don't know. I'm just thinking of all the schools I worked in. We always set up ways, because I was always mindful that not everyone wants to raise a suggestion. Yep. So it's literally like we had some
suggestion box.
Yeah, suggestion box. Or I found that it was a little naff. So like we used to have like a wall where people could just stick up Post-it notes.
Yep.
But then people started recognising people's handwriting, so then we had to change it up. But something like that, a way to bring forward the suggestion, and I think really back yourself, because if anything, if the answer is no, well, if they don't have it, then you're like nothing's changed anyway. Yeah. But you've raised the question. If they say yes and you weren't accessing it, how great! Then you get to maybe try and access that. Yeah. Yeah.
Leadership, it's such a fascinating thing, isn't it?
Like, I'm completely fascinated. It's a game changer.
Yeah, and I feel like my take, being exposed to a few different leadership programs and a few different industries with the work that we do, the principles are the same no matter what industry.
Yeah,
the delivery will be different.
Yeah. Yep.
And it just fascinates me because it almost seems like a universal language, but many people struggle to learn that language.
Oh yeah. There's a really interesting book by I want to say it's Paul Browning. Yeah, Paul Browning, who it's called Principled. So he came into a school up in Queensland, and when he started, the school was, he didn't realise, but it started and it was in a pretty big crisis. And it actually led to him realizing he had to completely restore the idea of trust in the whole school. So it became a PhD for him. And he wrote this book, and it's like 10 practices as leaders that you can do. And it's all about like really, it's completely transferable for any leader. It's, you know, like being confidential. It includes coaching and mentoring in there. It's about giving trust to others as well. So instead of you just expecting trust, it's like you have to actually give it and name it. But I'd really recommend it to anyone that's interested, particularly because it's written in a nice, easy to read way. But also at the end of each of the 10
pictures. I like pictures.
I really like pictures. Cool. That's a good idea. We should tell him. We should give him some feedback and say, third edition, could you just bring in some pictures?
Yeah.
Or like a graphic novel.
Or the touch and feel, you know, those
that would be
children's
good.
books.
I feel like my 4-year-old daughter would love that. Yeah, actually, that could be good, right? It's great. He then names and says, this is what it does look like. This is what it doesn't look like.
Yeah.
So, which is helpful. But I do think that could be good. You could do a charades version as well. That could be good. I reckon we're onto something here.
Yeah, a bit of PD for teachers too.
There you
go. You could just
act out confidential. Go.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
That's cool.
I feel like we're coming up with our own leadership programs. This is what we're doing now.
I have to take this offline for
performing arts and leadership together. Go.
Yeah. Like, sorry, I rudely cut in there with the book.
No, I love it. It's a great idea.
And so the book was called Principle.
Yeah, Principled.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Really helpful thing, because I think the reason I brought it up was it touches on, you're right, leadership it's transferable. People for eons have been fascinated. We have this idea of leadership, but I think at the heart of it, it's pretty simple stuff, but also super complex, because it's easy to say you're a leader and that you do certain things, or, you know, you're a trusting leader, but to actually do it every day, or to get really clear on what that means when you are doing it, I think that's the fun part and the tricky part. Like, that's the challenge.
Just love to pivot back to that, the concept of no.
Yep.
And saying no, because I think there's many professionals that I've spoken to, and young people that struggle to say no, in their personal life, in their work life, like all the time.
Yep.
What are some of the tips that you can recommend to know that you're saying no to the right things?
Well, I guess you need to come down to work out what your values are, which can be a really big thing. But there's two things that probably jump out to me, which is, so one's it's like a really helpful tool, and I've recently been using it myself, is you break down, I wish I had, I should act it out or get some sort of visual. So you think of all the different roles that you play, week by week. So for me, dad, husband, they always are the first two. Then, there's part of my role is I have to keep developing our team. There's business development. There's also, I facilitate programs and deliver workshops. I coach people. So I put all the separate things down on a page, and then I just write down what are the main things for each of those roles that I have to try and do that week, or that are on my agenda. So, for dad, like
the non-negotiables.
Yeah. And so even then it's filtering, because you could fill a page with all the things you do, but it's like, but if I sat down at the end of Sunday and I was like, geez, I'm glad I did that. What would I put on the list? So which really helps me. So then, obviously if I'm facilitating programs, I have to do that. Otherwise I'm not fulfilling my job, or I have my coaching clients. So I put those down. But for dad and husband stuff, it's, this week it was my wife's birthday. So I put down, take Ellen to Hot Springs, because I'd organised that birthday. So it was like that. For the dad stuff, it was picking the girls up from basketball training. It was making sure that I wrote down, it's silly, but I wrote down make delicious meal. Because I thought, I'll make sure something that they really enjoy. So it's those things. And then there's, work stuff as well. And the reason that it's been helpful for me is, and I'm thinking for teachers, is it reminds you that there's life outside of work. So, and it helps me prioritize, because every time I look at the page that's open on the desk, it reminds me that I've got these really good things happening as well as the work stuff. So I think that's an important thing to pull teachers and school leaders out of the trench, so that you can actually see the horizon. There's other stuff going on. And I think that's a really helpful thing. The other one is to help people with saying no. And this is something that I've seen work really well. So I learned it from a previous mentor, and it's a way to manage up. So often in schools we might say, guys, we need to do this, we need to stay back late for this production, or we need, actually, can you please go analyse this data? We need it for this team meeting. And most people would say, yep, okay, yep, sure. So instead what you can do is you say, okay, so if we're needing to do that, here's my list of, here's like all the things that we currently have right now. If we're going to fit that in there, can you just help me find what are the things we're not going to do then?
Yeah.
And once you do that, it feels super awkward when you first do it, because you're worried about, like there's the status in the conversation, all that. But once you do it, the person either looks at, and you have the list like literally between you. So you're directing it. It's not me saying to you, no, I don't want to do it. It's like, oh, I just need you. Can you help? And they suddenly see your list and they either say, oh, no, you've got enough going on, don't worry.
Yep.
Or they say, oh, actually, we can get this person. We could, but you don't need to worry about that, or we can take that off. Yeah, or, oh, do you know what? We've actually got a team that can help you with that, so don't worry about that one. So it starts to free you up. And then what you've also done is you've created a nice little feedback process for you and that person for like, this is how we try and reduce that list from just never ending.
Yeah. Dude, I love that. Because I think the biggest challenge is people go, I don't want to let this person down.
Yes.
Or I want to be seen as a yes person.
Yeah.
And what's another little task on everything else that I'm doing?
Yeah, I can get it done.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you were like, we have all these different hats that we wear. Like everyone does.
Yeah.
Whether you're a friend, whether you're a parent, whether you're, employee, business owner, whatever, we all have these different hats. And part of our identity, I believe, is a mix of all those things.
Yep.
And I think when we being a careers counsellor, I'm always like, so many people put their identity into just their work.
Yeah.
So when they lose their job,
it's
like they've lost their identity.
Yeah.
And I just love what you're saying about going, being able to say no so it doesn't impact those other important factors of who you are and what makes you you.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant. And the fact that you just go, hey, can you, and this is the beauty of, in my opinion, I'm doing a bit of a coaching round here, but
yeah, I love it.
What the beauty of coaching, in my opinion, teaches you how to communicate more effectively.
Yeah.
And then inviting someone into the conversation and inviting their opinion is so different to telling or talking at someone.
Yep.
And so when you have that slight position and that curiosity filter with the question of going, hey, these are all the things I'm currently doing. Just curious, what is it that I need to replace in order to do that task? Or what is it that I need to stop in order to do that task?
Yeah.
I think just invites the person into your own perspective.
Absolutely, yeah. Because they probably have no idea of you're the expert of your world.
Yeah.
So, they're coming with a thing that they're wanting done. Yeah. All invitational, yeah.
Do you see that as a common challenge in the work that you do, that people don't understand how much another person has on their plate? Or
yeah, I think there's that, yes, and there's people just adding things to their shoulders.
Expectations on themselves.
Yeah, and also and literally just tasks, because I think you're right. It's the tricky part with working in, say, what I describe as like the caring fields or the caring industry is we deeply care about helping people. So therefore, when we overplay that strength, we just keep saying yes and we keep putting things on our shoulders. Because like you mentioned with identity, it's like, well, if I don't help, will people still like me, or am I enough? Is that okay? Like,
my reputation's on the line.
Like that. What will they think? It's like, no, they'll be okay. They'll be all right.
Yeah, they're like, well, ask someone else.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Yeah, or maybe that's not the most important thing. Yeah. I think it's it's a really interesting point around. People do need to be aware. Even some of the work that I do with, and this was when I was in schools and particularly now too, is helping people start to think before you have a conversation. So particularly I'm always trying to keep the teacher perspective, and always trying to keep the middle leaders perspective, because they're so busy, and they've got so many competing demands on them. So if you're an assistant principal or a principal and you're going to have a conversation with either a teacher or a middle leader, always needing to think, is now the time to have that? Just because it's right for you, is it right for them? Because ultimately they're the ones who are probably going to have to enact it. So therefore, is now the best time? And if it's not, then just hold on. Just because it feels important, and it might feel that it's urgent, is it actually? And if you just give yourself that break, I think that can be helpful. And particularly, I also think that for teachers, because they get given things or they're creating things, and they can often feel that it's urgent and important. But giving themselves the space to actually say, geez, do I bloody actually have to do this right now? Like, it feels like I do, but if you don't, then you might be able to shelve it, or you can pass it off, or you know, if it is, or you realise it is and you have to get it in because it's a set deadline, then you have to do it, but you might have to get rid of something else.
Yeah. Mate, one of the last questions I want to ask you before we go into our roaring segment. I've often heard a similar narrative since COVID of teachers wanting to transition into different roles, different industries, things like that. You're someone who's been a teacher and now you have made the transition into coaching, training, facilitating, a pivot. Any advice that you would give around that process if you know a teacher's thinking, you know, I just need a bit of a break from teaching, or I want to experience a different industry or a different role? Yeah,
I think for me the biggest part is thinking of your transferable skills. Now I know, like, even as I say that sounds really, really vague. So for me, when I eventually made this shift, the thing that I've constantly done over my career is I've kept trying to notice what is it that I really enjoy doing. Like, so within my roles, what is it that I enjoy doing, and then what is it that I'm also good at, and then also, you know, you then get an overlap of things that you enjoy and you're good at. And then I also started to try and notice what are the things that I enjoy, but I'm not that good at. So like I had to work on those. So throughout my career, like I wasn't sitting there thinking this all the time, but it was just, I just started to notice there were certain things, you know, I really enjoyed presenting. I could articulate things. I liked bringing together people and teams. So as I started noticing that and the feedback, I just started to notice some feedback that I would get from leaders or people within my teams. So over time, that started to almost build up an awareness for me of like potential jobs. So as I started to look at, while I was an assistant principal, all the work I did was around team development. It was about, you know, delivering, facilitating professional learning. So it just happened that I was part of this mailing list with Growth Coaching International, and as this position I was reading through it, I was like, this is all the stuff that I enjoy, I can do, and then there was the next stretch for me with like, well, I enjoy that. I think I could be pretty good at that. And so I threw my hat in the ring, like, and my rule's always been if you would look back and regret not doing it, then you have to do it.
Such a good line.
And so I think for me, just trying to work out like what is it you enjoy, what is it you're good at, and then also what do you enjoy and you're good at, because not everything you're good at you enjoy. So, you know, just because you're really good at it doesn't mean you have to go do that. To consider those. And then I think it's also just, oh God, this sounds so cliche when I say it. Just back yourself, just give it a bloody go.
We're a podcast full of cliches, mate.
No, I love it.
Embrace it.
And I think I'm super lucky. So my wife is incredibly supportive. So she literally said when she was reading it, and I've done similar for her, she read it, she's like, Dan, this is you.
You have to apply.
Yeah, this is you. Yeah. This is all the stuff you bang on about. This is all the stuff you go on about, mate. Like you need to go for this. So because we'd had so many conversations about like things that we enjoyed and things that we like to do and things that we're looking for. So I'd suggest that is to start by working out that. Ask your family or your friends what they've noticed, particularly all like work friends. If they've noticed a strength or something, which sounds super awkward and super weird, especially Australians. We don't like to, but you know, just saying like, look, I'm just starting to think about some potential, not necessarily options to leave, but it's like, you know, potential other, considerations for jobs or roles that I might take on in the future. I'm just trying to develop myself. And get that feedback. Yeah,
I love that. You know, we spend 90,000 hours of our time at work.
Jeez.
It's a long time.
That is a long time.
And so like to do one type of job for that full 90,000 hours.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I, we talk about this with teaching. I think sometimes, I genuinely love teaching. Like it's like I get into my flow when I'm doing it. Like time just, But it doesn't have to just look like it's in a classroom.
Yeah.
There's so many options that you can do. So I think there's so many pathways. It's about, just reaching out and trying to explore what they look like, because so many people don't realize that. So I would say, like, if anyone does want to reach out, like they can genuinely talk, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thanks, man.
I'm just paying it forward. I had people that did it for me too.
Yeah. It's so important to pay it forward. I love that. Cool, man. Let's enter the roaring segment.
Okay, all right.
Taco.
I'm roaring.
I'm brewing. I'm soaking it up.
Okay, just thought I'd drop you a little late night surprise for you.
I'm not sure if you can hear the sizzling. I'm just sort of stewing on that. Thoughts?
I'm roaring.
So, mate, what are you roaring about lately?
All right, I'm roaring about, sounds so dumb, but I'm roaring about two things in particular. One is just pushing and moving heavy things around. So I've joined this cult called CrossFit. I don't know if you've heard.
Yep. I used to CrossFit, so I know. Know about the cult.
Yeah. So so I'm really enjoying it, more for like mental and physical health aspects. Like I just bloody love it. It's so much fun. I grew up playing basketball and rugby, so getting down there, just moving some weights around and getting to meet a good community of people who are looking to, take that little tweak and keep pushing themselves. Plus I just get to push some heavy shit around.
Yeah, nice.
And then the other thing I'm enjoying, there's this awesome book called Drive by Dan Pink, and it's just shifting Drive.
Okay.
Incredible book to shift the way that you think. If you're a manager or a leader, it'll really enhance the way that you think about what is it that you're doing to best help your teams. But more so the getting out and about and just enjoying this cultish sort of thing that is CrossFit. It's ridiculous, mate. I've completely bought in. I came home
joining
and
a footy club, isn't it?
Oh my God. I came in, I've got the hoodie, I've got a beanie now. My wife's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
I'm in.
I've I've been initiated.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Fantastic.
So the tats are suddenly going to happen next time we see each other, mate, it'll happen.
Just paleo diet.
Yeah. Well, I thought, look, sponsorship, I'll just get CrossFit across the forehead. I'm not that deep. I'm not that deep into it.
Now, mate, if listeners want to get in contact with the wonderful work that you do, how can they learn more about, coaching space, even get in contact with yourself?
Yeah.
Follow your updates.
I think, so you can head to our website, growthcoachinginternational.com.au. Or you can just Google Growth Coaching International, Dan Steele. I'm also, you can get probably best in contact with me via email through dsteele@growthcoaching.com.au.
Fantastic.
Or LinkedIn, so under Daniel Steele too. I'd say they're the two best options. Email or via LinkedIn would be the best ways. But genuinely, any way I can help any sort of teacher, leader, I'd love to.
Yeah, perfect. Mate,
thank you, sir.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.